Now that we've got our Docker server up and running, we can start hitting it inside of our Yew.rs application. That's right, it's time for HTTP requests. So the crate we're going to be using, we can find it's referenced in Yew.rs, not on Next. In more external libraries. Rec.wasm. So it's an HTTP library for our WASM apps. Basically, it's going to give us the ability to use the equivalent of the browser fetch method. I mean, it's basically going to use the browser fetch method in the browser side, and it's going to expose that API for ourselves. It is helpful if you understand how fetch works. We're not going to go into it fully here because there's going to be a lot, but by the end of this, you should be able to use fetch if you haven't been able to in just JavaScript. All right, so let's make sure that everything is working on our database side. I have Thunder Client installed. Now, when we create a brand new account, it's going to also create new users for us too. So I've previously created an account, so I'm going to just go ahead and log in again. So when I send that request, I get back a token for this user. This token we're going to use to get our tasks. Let's go ahead and try to actually do that here. So I have a get request to, I don't know why it's like over here incorrect, but it's to HTTP localhost 3000 API v1 tasks. For our headers, we need to pass in this x auth token header. And then we're going to pass in this this token here, so I need to copy it. Paste that in there. The body, we don't need to pass anything in. It's just a get request. So when I send this, we get back an object with our data, and inside the data is an array with our 2 default tasks. Okay, so now we want to do this inside of Rust itself. So what I'm going to do is just take over our main library here. Don't need that. You can just be divs. All right, so I'm just going to get rid of our login and display for right now. They've helped us out, but we don't need that for this demo. Right now, what we're going to do is do a get request to to that API. Well, we need the URL and that token. So let's pretend that we have a state set up for ourselves. So I'm just going to do a use state really quickly for this. So we're going to do a pub struct. This is going to be essentially a user. We're going to have the only thing I really care about in here is the token. So token is going to be a string. And we're going to do a let state equals a use state. And we're going to return a brand new user with a token of this fun thing, which we have to put in quotes. And we're going to own that. Okay, so that gives us our state. Let's also have this entire action happen on a button click, because that will then show how the callbacks sort of work with this request. So we're going to create a button here. We do need a callback for it first. Let's just create that really quickly. We do let on click equals, this is going to be a Yew callback. There's no reason we couldn't use like a Udux callback or any other state management callback for this. In this case, I don't really care about this event at all. I'm not going to use it. So there. Let's just do a really quick log, and we'll just say clicked. And we'll create a button with an on click here. And we'll just say like get task. I need to pull in import log from glue console log. Okay. We're gonna head back to our app, and so if I click the button, we then see clicked. Okay, excellent. Now I want to actually do I want to do the request. I also need to get state in here. So this is gonna be interesting. So we need to do a move. We're gonna do the sort of trick that that we see in the documentation that allows us to it's basically shadow the state, but in a sort of like a nice way. We use this block here, and then we're going to return the callback from the block into onClick. So inside of here, we're going to do a let state equals state.clone. Now, in this specific case, it's not really necessary to clone the state because, well, just storing this token and nothing else is there. But if the state is going to be used somewhere else, like in another event handler or down here in our HTML, then yes, we definitely need to clone it. So I'm going to keep that here for right now, even though it's going to, warn me. Now we have access inside of here. So we need to do a request. The problem here is that if we go take a look at we want to take a look at requasm. Let's go into our docs. So HTTP, it actually shows we need async await for this. And we're not in an async block. And if we try to bring in async, things are just not going to work. I can't make this like a move async. It's going to yell at me. It's going to be terrible. The answer is not to pull in something like Tokyo and just start going ham with an async, a futures runner. Instead, we're going to find another crate that's going to help us out a lot, which in this case is wasm bindgen futures. Wasm bindgen futures is really cool because it allows us to basically take something that's async and convert it into a JavaScript promise, but then it still is synchronous code in the Rust side, which is exactly what we want here. So we have our callback move. We're now going to do a wasm bindgen in cargo.toml. I've actually already installed it here. So wasm bindgen futures. And then they have this spawn local. That's what we want to use. Now, this doesn't take a callback or a closure or anything like that. It just takes an asynchronous block. So we're going to do an async and a move, because once again, we need this token in here. Now, inside of this, we can now finally do our call. So we're going to do let our response equals requasm. Actually, it's just going to be request from requasm. We're going to want to do a get request to the URL. Well, in this case, we can just hard code this in, but the act of getting it in is going to be the same as the way we get the token in. So HTTP localhost 3000 API v1 tasks. Now we need to set that header. Luckily, we can just do header and then give a key and a value. So the key is going to be this XAuth token. Now the value is going to be this token up here. So we want to grab state, get the token. We don't want to take ownership of it here, so we can just give a reference to it, and that should be fine. Yeah, this one is close that block. Okay, then we want to send this. And we're going to have a little bit of problem with the state because we've moved it into the callback and then straight into here. We actually need to do one more clone for that. So we're going to do let state equals state dot clone. It's going to make it a little bit like it's basically going to tell the compiler, okay, what's really happening? What's going on behind the scenes? So it just knows, hey, we're not moving 2 levels in, we're moving into here and then moving into here. It's like I know it feels like it should figure that out automatically, but this prevents any errors from happening. Okay, so we've got our header. Now we want to send the request. After we send it, we're going to get a future, so we need to await this. Now, it would be nice to be able to question mark this result, but unfortunately, we can't set a return value for this spawn local. So we're just going to have to unwrap this. Now, we could unwrap or else, or maybe like just handle this and like print something out to the screen. In this case, we're just going to unwrap it. It shouldn't fail because we control this this backend. Now we're going to get a response out here. So let's go ahead and now check to see if things are working correctly. We're going to console log out the status code. So we're going to do our log response dot status. And when I click on get tasks, we get 200 back. And if we go check a look at the network tab, we should see here that we made the request, and here's our data coming back. Okay, great. But we're not done yet because we need to like actually get the data out to have this be of any use to us whatsoever. So how are we going to do that? Our response, we need to actually get JSON out of it. So this is where, if you're familiar with fetch, you know that what we have to do is run a method on it called JSON to convert it into JSON. That itself is asynchronous, so we have to await that. And then unwrap, because that's another result. And then that should give us what we really want to have, which is the true response. There's a problem though here, is that it doesn't know what this JSON is. Like we can't it can't convert this. And I'm surprised. Oh wait, it didn't save. That's why. I was gonna say, like, I'm surprised that it's not yelling at me. So response no longer has the status. At this point in time, I can do see, it's going to be a sorted JSON 2-string pretty, and let's give the response here. So we're going to want to print that out, but it doesn't know what this is. Oh, that's going to give us a result. So we have to unwrap you. Okay, so now the 2-string pretty and the JSON here is yelling the same, like, hey, it doesn't know what this type is. So let's look at this again. Let's go in here. We're gonna see we get an object back with data at the top level, and there's nothing else at this top level. And then inside of that is an array that has a task object in it. So we need to recreate this for ourselves. Let's start by creating the task object. In the real code, creating some kind of like API file or module that like is in charge of all the types and like actually doing the requests might be helpful in like abstracting things out. For a to-do app like this, it's probably not going to be that big of a deal to sort of like have things wherever you feel like them. But in larger apps, there's just sort of like a lot of these structs that we need to create to define what these types are. Okay, so we need two types here. We need the task itself. So we're going to do pub struct task. We're going to go ahead and just immediately derive this, and we're going to get a serialize and deserialize going. And what can our task have? So if we come back to here, we can see I can actually just copy you, paste you in here, and we're just sort of going to work with this. Let's multi-cursor here. Go to the end of the line. Okay, so we're going to get new types there. That's going to be fine. We don't need that quote. You get rid of that quote. Okay, so that gives us our completed at. Completed at is something that we may get a null on. Basically, if it's completed, it's going to be a date time, which probably is going to come in as some kind of string that we can just print out to the screen. So let's we could also convert this to an actual like JS date, but in this case, I think a string is going to be fine for us. But because it could be null, I'm going to do an option with a string inside. All right, next up, description. This can also be null. It's not required to have a description when we create a task. So here an option with this string inside. The ID is absolutely required. This is going to be U32. It cannot be negative, so we don't need to use an integer. Priority. Okay. In a priority is going to be like a single letter ABC. So that's a character, but also I think there's always going to have. So we should be able to say char. And then a title. Title is absolutely required. This is going to be a string. Okay, so that gives us our task, but we're going to have a vector of tasks or array of tasks that come in on a data. So we need one more time. I'm going to create a derive, serialize, and a deserialize, obstruct, and I'm going to call this the like the task response. And all we're going to have here is a pub. Oh, I'm going to make all these public just that we can access them, and it's going to be easier to like read them all. We're going to have our data. Now our data is going to have an array. So that's a vector of a task. Okay, everything's okay here. And now it's time for us to give this type to the JSON. So this is going to be our task response. That makes you happy. And then what about you? What are expected unknown? So it wants this to be a reference. So I hand that to you. We have no errors. Let's go make sure that this works. All right, so back to the console. When I hit get tasks, hey, everything is printed out. So now we have the full response of our HTTP request printed out. We have our data, we have the two default tasks displaying. And if they're displaying there, that does mean that we have access to them inside of code. So let's say I wanted to like then store this back into state again, where maybe in this state, we're also going to store like maybe our like a task. So do like pub tasks, and that's a vector. Let's do like an option, a vec of task. So basically, like, hey, we may not have them at all, but when we do have them, they're they're in a vector here. Okay. So now we're missing our tasks. Yeah, right next to oh, you're that one. Okay. Tasks. And you are a none. Oh, no comma there. That's a problem. Okay, so now we've initialized the state. I want to now store this inside. So we don't need to log this anymore here. We have a response, the task response. We can get the data inside. That's going to be fine. We also have this state here. So I should be able to do to get this out, we're going to do a state dot set. It's going to be the value. So we should probably get the user out of it first. So let user equals state, I'm gonna deref, and I'm just gonna clone this. It's probably gonna yell at me because this doesn't implement clone. I'm expecting it will. Or it's fine maybe. Can I find value? Okay, so that's gonna be this user. I want you to be a mod. Mute. Let mute user equals, okay, state reref clone. That gives us, it's saying that it's a reference to the user. Let's see, then our user expected struct. We can, I guess we can deref you. I'm wondering, I deref, let's see. We deref and then clone. I think we need to derive clone from here. That gives us a user. So once again, like one of those little weird errors that like is misleading us just slightly. Okay, so now I want to now set the tasks on here. So we're gonna do user.tasks equals, it's gonna be sum. And then inside of that, it's gonna be our response dot data. And then I just want the contents of that, which are gonna be this vec of the task. Okay, great. So there's that. And we set the state here. That's great. Okay, and then let's, where's my error? You're upset because, oh, clone now needs to be access available on task because we made it available on user. So we'll just derive it on here. Okay, everything is working. If we run it, now we don't get a log anymore, but we don't get any errors when it happens. So at this point, we might be able to just like dump everything out in here, but actually like looping through things and displaying that in the HTML is going to be a different lesson. So let's go ahead and just sort of dump everything out as it were. We're gonna have, let's do a pre-tag for this. And so inside of here, we are going to use our state. We want our state and our task to display. So state.tasks. Now you're not going to allow me to just print this all out. I think we're gonna have to use our, yeah, it doesn't implement this just display. So let's do, it's also like an unwrap. Let's do our asserted JSON. We're gonna do a toString pretty, and our value is gonna be that, okay, the state dot It's gonna be a reference to the state dot task. We're gonna unwrap. Now, can we really unwrap? Because it doesn't really exist like for the first part, does it? And you. Oh, and then let's see, that is an unwrap there. It's the unwrap, and here is the question of. It seems to be okay with this. Let's go ahead and find out whether or not. Oh yeah, so it's going to just display null. I get tasks, and now we display all the tasks into the DOM. And so, as a quick recap, what we've done, we've set up an HTTP request inside of our Rust that runs at runtime. When we click a button, it reaches out, requests the server, passes in some headers for authentication, gets the tasks back. We store those in internal state for that component, and then it sort of auto displays out to the screen as soon as that changes. So I know this is a lot. We're going to be going over some like posts also, and just a little bit more for practice with the requests, and yeah, that's pretty much it. Anyways, I've talked too much. Thank you so much for watching. Hopefully this has been helpful, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.